Rael remembered the exact day his life stopped being his own. He was 16, standing in the middle of the school gym during the annual pack bonding ceremony, wearing a white shirt that was slightly too big for him because his mother had bought it, hoping he would grow into it. He had not grown into it. He was still the same skinny, quiet boy he had always been, the one who read books during lunch and walked home alone and never really fit anywhere. The ceremony was simple. The alpha of each student pack would walk the room, and the bond, the invisible thread that connected one alpha to their omega, would pull when it was right. Most people found their matches by 15. Rael had sat through 2 ceremonies already with nothing happening. His mother told him not to worry. His father said nothing. His older sister gave him a pitying look that said everything she did not want to say out loud. And then Kim Dowan walked into the room. Dowan was everything Rael was not: tall, broad shouldered, with sharp eyes, and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from something cold and hard. He was the top alpha of his year, the kind of boy whose name everyone knew even before he introduced himself. He walked like the floor belonged to him. He looked at people like he was deciding whether or not they were worth his time. The thread pulled, not gently, not the way Rael had imagined it in all the romance novels he had secretly read under his blanket at night. The warm glow, the soft recognition, the feeling of coming home. This was sharp, like a hook catching behind his ribs and yanking forward. Rael actually gasped out loud. The sound was embarrassing. Several people turned to look at him. Dowan stopped walking. He turned his head and looked at Rael with those cold, sharp eyes, and Rael watched something pass across his face. Not joy, not warmth, not even mild happiness. It was something closer to resignation, like a boy who had just received news he had been dreading for a long time. The room erupted in polite applause. Pack bonds were considered sacred. Nobody congratulated Dowan personally. They congratulated the bond, the ceremony, the tradition. Rail stood very still while people around him smiled and clapped, and he kept his eyes on Dowan's face, and Dowan kept his eyes on the floor. That was the beginning. They were assigned to the same pack group by the school the following week. It was mandatory. Bonded pairs were expected to integrate, to learn each other's rhythms, to build the foundation that would supposedly last a lifetime. The school counselor called it a beautiful process. Rail called it sitting 3 desks away from someone who had never once looked directly at him. Dowan was not cruel. That was the thing that made it so hard. If he had been cruel, if he had mocked Rail, or been openly cold, or said something sharp and ugly, then Rail could have built a wall. Hate is easy to hold on to. Hate keeps you warm. But Dowan was just absent. He was there physically. He showed up to pack meetings. He sat at the correct lunch table on the days they were supposed to spend together. He answered Rail's questions with short, complete sentences. He never forgot anything he was supposed to do. He just did all of it, like a boy completing a checklist, efficiently, dutifully, with absolutely no feeling at all. The other boys in the pack noticed. They were careful about it. Nobody said anything directly to Rael's face, but he heard the whispers, he saw the glances. He caught the way people's eyes would flick between him and Dewan during pack dinners, tracking the cold distance between them, like spectators watching a game where one side had already stopped playing. Rael learned to be small. He stopped trying to start conversations. He stopped sitting close. He stopped leaving notes in Dowan's school locker the way some bonded Omegas did. Little things, small gestures, the language of care. He had tried that once in the first month. A simple note: I made extra dumplings. Left them in the pack kitchen if you want some. Dowan had eaten the dumplings without saying anything. Not a thank you. Not a smile, not a single word. Rail did not leave notes after that. By the time they were 18, Rael had built a very organized and very private life inside the space Dowan left empty. He had friends, not many, but real ones. He had a part-time job at a bookshop 2 streets from campus. He had a small collection of pressed flowers in a notebook that nobody knew about. He had learned to find warmth in places that had nothing to do with the boy the universe had decided was his person. He had learned to be okay. He told himself this every morning, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at his own reflection. He would say it quietly like a spell. I am okay. I do not need him to love me. I am okay, he almost believed it. Almost. There were unspoken rules between them. Rules nobody wrote down, nobody discussed, nobody officially agreed to. They had simply arrived. The way furniture arrives in a room you have always lived in till you cannot remember a time it was not there. Rule 1. Rail did not ask for things, not help with his bag when it was heavy, not company when he was walking home at night, not conversation when the silence in the pack common room stretched so long. It started to feel like a physical weight sitting on his chest. He did not ask, and Dowan did not offer, and they both pretended this was a perfectly normal way for two bonded people to exist. Rule 2. Dowan managed everything external: pack schedules, pack finances, any issue that required an alpha's authority. He handled all of it with the same cold efficiency that he handled everything else. He was never late, never wrong, never careless. If the pack needed something, Dowan got it done before anyone had finished asking. It was impressive, actually, in a way that felt like watching a machine. You could admire the function without ever feeling anything warm about it. Rule 3. Nobody talked about the bond. Not the boys in the pack, not the school counselors, not Rael's mother when she called on weekends and asked carefully worded questions about how things were going. Certainly not Rael and Dowan themselves. The bond was there, they could both feel it. The faint, low hum of connection that bonded pairs described in different ways. Some said it felt like a second heartbeat. Some said it felt like the knowledge of a room just beyond a wall. Rail said nothing because nobody asked him directly, and he was following Rule 1. It was a Tuesday in October when the first crack appeared. Rail was in the campus library, sitting at his usual corner table near the window that looked out onto the courtyard, doing absolutely nothing because he had finished his work an hour ago and he was enjoying the rare feeling of having nowhere to be. It was raining, the kind of slow, steady rain that made the whole world look soft and gray and far away. He had his chin in his hand, and he was watching a leaf travel along the current that ran through the courtyard gutter, and he was thinking about nothing important. You look like you're doing something very serious. He turned so fast his elbow knocked his pen off the table. Dowan was standing at the end of his table. He was wearing a dark jacket with the collar turned up, and his hair was slightly damp from the rain. And he was looking at Rail with an expression that Rail could not immediately identify because it was not any of the usual ones. Not blank, not polite and distant. Something else. Something that looked almost like curiosity. I was watching a leaf, Rail said, because he was too surprised to lie. Dowan looked out the window. He found the leaf. He watched it for a moment. Then, very quietly, he said, "It's going to go down the drain." "I know," Rail said. "You're still watching it." "Yes." Dowan looked at him then. Really looked. Not the efficient passing glance of a boy checking off a to-do list, but an actual steady look, the kind that meant someone was paying attention. Rail felt his heart do something strange and unhelpful in his chest. "Can I sit here?" Dowan asked. The library had 47 other empty seats. Rail knew because he had counted them once during a particularly slow afternoon. "Sure," he said. Dowan sat down across from him. He opened his bag and took out a textbook and a notebook, and he started working. He did not speak. Rail turned back to the window. The leaf had gone down the drain. He picked up his fallen pen and opened a book he had already read and stared at the first page without reading any of it. They sat like that for 2 hours. When Dowan packed up to leave, he paused. Just for a second, just the smallest hesitation, like he was going to say something. Rail waited. He kept his eyes on his book and he waited, and his pulse was doing things it had absolutely no business doing. Dowan did not say anything. He picked up his bag and walked out. Rail let out a breath he had been holding for about 45 minutes. He closed his book. He looked at the empty seat across from him. It still held the shape of warmth, the slight warmth of recent presence, the ghost of someone who had just been there. Rail pressed his fingertips to the table surface, not quite touching the spot where Dowan's hand had rested. He pulled his hand back quickly, like the table had burned him. This was the problem with unspoken rules. They had worked perfectly well for 2 years, but rules only work if nothing changes. And something had shifted, small as a leaf, quiet as rain, and Rail could feel it the way you feel a change in weather before it arrives. Not in your eyes, in your bones. He gathered his things and walked back to the pack dorm. He told himself it meant nothing. He spent the entire walk home trying to remember what Darwin's expression had looked like. In that moment of hesitation at the library door, he could not name it. But he could not forget it either. There was one person who saw everything. Park Junho was Rael's best friend in the way that best friends are sometimes people who chose you so firmly and so loudly that you had no choice but to accept it. He had sat down next to Rael on the first day of school 3 years ago, looked at the book Rael was reading, and said, I cried at the ending of that. Rael had blinked. Junho had grinned, and that had been that. Junho was not part of Rael and Darwin's pack. He was an unbound Omega, cheerfully unbothered by the fact, who moved through the social world of the academy like water through rocks. Easy, adaptable, impossible to stop. He knew everyone. He noticed everything, and he was the one person Rael had never been able to lie to successfully. Darwin sat with you in the library for 2 hours, Junho said on Wednesday morning, handing Rael a coffee cup with the kind of casual delivery that meant he had been thinking about how to bring this up since he heard about it. How do you already know that? Rael said. Minji was there, she told Seo-hyun. Seo-hyun told me. Junho sat down on the bench beside him. She said he looked at you like you were a math problem he was trying to figure out. Rael looked at his coffee. That's not romantic. It's not unromantic either, Junho said. For Darwin, that might be the most romantic thing he's ever done. He sat in a library. He sat in your library, in your corner, at your table. Junho pointed his own coffee cup at Rael for emphasis. Darwin could have sat anywhere. He has his own study room, booked every Tuesday. He chose your table. Rael did not say anything. Junho watched him the way a person watches someone standing at the edge of a very high diving board. Ready to cheer, ready to wince, not entirely sure which one it was going to be. He doesn't love me, Rael said finally. He's never loved me. You know that. I know that's what you've decided, Junho said. It's not a decision, it's a fact. 2 years, Junho. 2 years of nothing. You don't just. Rael stopped. He pressed his lips together. You don't change after 2 years. You've been in love with him for 2 years, Junho said, very quietly. I have not, Rael. Silence. A bird landed on the courtyard railing and looked at them with supreme indifference. It doesn't matter, Rael said. His voice was flat and controlled, and it cost him something to make it that way. Even if it doesn't matter. You can't make someone feel something. And I am not going to spend my life waiting for a person who looks at me like I'm furniture. Junho was quiet for a moment. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. What if he's scared, he said. Rael laughed. It came out short and a little sharp. Darwin isn't scared of anything. Everyone is scared of something, Junho said. Cold people are usually the most scared. They just got very good at covering it up. He paused. I'm not saying run to him and confess. I'm saying, don't close the door before you know what's behind it. Rael looked at him. Junho looked back. He had honest eyes, Junho, the kind of eyes that were hard to dismiss. He asked to sit with me, Rael said, reluctantly, like the words were being pulled out of him. I know. And then he left without saying anything. I know that too. Junho bumped his shoulder gently. But he came. That part matters. Rael looked away. The bird had gone. The courtyard was empty again, just stone and pale morning light, and the smell of rain still hanging in the air from yesterday. He thought about the hesitation at the library door, the almost words. He thought about 2 years of silence, and what it felt like to suddenly want to break it. He finished his coffee. He stood up. He said, I have class, which was true, and also meant nothing, because they both knew he was running away from the conversation. Junho let him go. He always let Rael go when he needed to. That was the thing about real friends. They knew when to push and when to open their hands. But as Rael walked across the courtyard, Junho called after him. He watches you, you know, when you're not looking. Rael stopped walking. He did not turn around. His hand tightened around his empty coffee cup. Don't tell me things like that, he said. Okay, Junho said, I won't. But he had already said it, and Rael carried it with him all day like a stone in his pocket. Small and smooth and heavier than it looked. The pack dinner happened on the last Friday of every month, and it was one of the unspoken rules that everyone showed up. The whole pack, 8 people, including Rael and Darwin, would crowd into the pack common room kitchen and cook together and eat together and be, in theory, a unit, a family of sorts. In practice, it was mostly Junho's energy, guest invited always, keeping the conversation alive, while Dawen sat at the head of the table and Rael sat at the far end, and they both pretended this was normal. This month's dinner was hot pot. There was a lot of steam and a lot of noise, and someone had made a playlist that kept skipping. Lee Seobin, the most cheerful person in the pack, was doing a dramatic retelling of something that had happened in his physics class that week and making everyone laugh. Rael was laughing too, genuinely, easily, because he liked these people, even if the circumstances that put him among them were complicated. He looked up mid-law and caught Dowen watching him. Not a glance, not an accidental meeting of eyes. Dowen was watching him, the way Junho had described, the way Rael had told himself he was imagining, steady and quiet, and with that strange expression that Rael still could not name. When their eyes met, Dowen did not look away. He held it for 1 second, 2 seconds, and then he picked up his chopsticks and turned his attention back to his bowl like nothing had happened. Rael looked back at Seobin. He laughed at the right moment. He said something at the right time. He was a very good performer when he needed to be. Under the table, his hands were shaking slightly. After dinner, the pack dispersed, some to the common room sofa, some to their individual rooms, Junho to the kitchen because he had appointed himself unofficial dessert coordinator and produced a suspicious amount of ingredients from somewhere. Rael was standing on the small balcony off the dining room, letting the cold air settle him down. The balcony door opened. He knew without turning who it was. He had 2 years of practice learning the exact weight of Dowen's footsteps. Dowen came and stood beside him at the railing, not close, a polite, correct distance. They looked out at the campus together in silence. The lights were on in the academic buildings across the way, and everything looked warm and golden from here and very far away. You were laughing, Dowen said. Rail looked at him sideways. That's generally what people do at dinner. You have a loud laugh. Dowen was not looking at him. He was looking at the lights. I didn't know that. Rail stared. 2 years. They had been in the same room hundreds of times. And Dowen had not known he had a loud laugh. You weren't paying attention, Rail said. He had not meant it to come out like that. Level, simple, honest. But it did. Dowen's jaw tightened. I know, he said. The silence that followed was different from their usual silence. Their usual silence was comfortable in the way that old pain becomes comfortable. Familiar and expected. This silence had edges. Dowen, Rail said, and then stopped because he did not know what came after. Dowen finally turned to look at him. Up close, in the low light from inside, his face looked different, less sculpted, more like a person. I'm sorry, Dowen said. Rail blinked. What? For 2 years. Dowen looked like the words were being dragged out of him slowly. I know I haven't. I know it wasn't what it should have been. You don't have to. I'm not saying it because I have to. Dowen turned back to the railing. He gripped it with both hands. His knuckles were pale. I'm saying it because I know what I did, or what I didn't do. Which is worse? Rail looked at him, at the tight grip, at the jaw muscle working, at the rigid control of a person trying very hard not to come undone in front of someone. Something moved in his chest, something he did not want to name. Okay, he said softly. Dowen looked at him. Okay, he repeated. I heard you, Rail said. That's all. It was not forgiveness, it was not anger. It was just acknowledgement. Receipt of something that had been offered. Dowen stared at him for a long moment like he was trying to understand a language he had never learned. Then Junho's voice exploded from inside the kitchen. Who ate the last mango? And the spell broke and Rael stepped back inside. And Dowen followed a moment later, and the pack evening continued. But something had shifted, and this time, Rael let himself feel it. It started with a notebook. Rael found it 3 days after the balcony conversation, wedged between his assigned locker and the wall. Thin, pale blue cover, no name on it. He almost left it. Then he noticed his name written inside the front cover. Not his full name, just Rael, in handwriting he recognized after 2 years of reading pack notices and scheduling documents. He stood in the empty hallway for a long time. Then he took the notebook home. Inside were 12 pages of writing. Not letters exactly, not a diary. Something in between. Fragmented thoughts. crossed out lines, sentences that started and then broke off midway, like someone trying to find the right words and failing repeatedly. You always look like you've already decided how things are going to go. I don't know if that makes you brave or just tired. I watched you from the window today. You stopped to help a first year find the counselor's office. You gave him directions, and then you walked with him halfway there, even though you were running late for your own class. You didn't tell anyone. You probably forgot about it by lunchtime. I haven't forgotten it. I wanted to ask you something today. I got as far as standing outside the library door. Then I left. This happens a lot. I'm not sure what I'm afraid of. The pack likes you better than they like me. You know that, right? They're polite to me because they have to be. They want to be around you. I know I was wrong from the beginning. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't that I didn't want you. It was that wanting felt like something I didn't know how to survive. I've never been good at needing things. Rail sat on his bed for a very long time after he finished reading. He thought about Junho saying, "Cold people are usually the most scared." He thought about Dawan standing at the library door, hesitating, saying nothing. He thought about 2 years of absence and what it looked like now, from the other side of those 12 pages. Not cruelty, not indifference, something more tangled. A boy who had wanted and been terrified of wanting, and handled it the only way he knew, by going very, very still. Rail picked up his own pen. He opened the notebook to the first empty page. He wrote, "I found your notebook. I read all of it. I don't know what to do with it yet, but I'm keeping it." He left it on Dowan's desk the next morning before pack meeting, while Dowan was still in the bathroom. He sat down in his usual seat at the far end of the table, and he stared at the wall and he waited. Dowan came in, sat down, opened the notebook, read the one line. He did not look at Rail, but his shoulders dropped just slightly, just a fraction, the loosening of something that had been held too tightly for too long. And Rail, who had spent 2 years reading rooms because no one was reading him, caught it immediately. The pack meeting started. Agendas were discussed. Things were decided. Halfway through, there was a light nudge against Rail's foot under the table. Just the briefest contact. Barely there. Gone in a second. Rail looked at his hands in his lap. He pressed his lips together to keep them from doing something embarrassing. He nudged back. A silence from Dowan's side of the table. Then, another nudge. Firmer this time. Like a question with a little more confidence in it. Lee Seobin was talking about something related to an upcoming pack event. Nobody was looking at them. Rail nudged back. This was, by any measurable standard, an absurd way for two 18-year-olds to communicate. Rail was aware of this. He did not care even slightly. He opened his own notebook and wrote, very small, in the margin, "I didn't know you were watching." He slid it to his right without looking up. It disappeared. A pause. It came back. Under his words, in that same cramped, familiar handwriting, "I've always been watching. I was just bad at everything else." Rail read it twice. He kept his face very neutral. He wrote, "You could have said something, it came back. So could you?" Rail stared at that for a second. Then he wrote, smaller still, "I was trying not to want anything from you." Long pause. The notebook came back. "Me too. We're both idiots," T. Rail wrote. The notebook came back one last time that meeting, and Rail looked down and felt something in his chest crack open, warm and complicated and terrifying. "Yeah, but I think I want to stop being one." It was Seobin who accidentally broke everything. They were in the common room the following Tuesday evening. Most of the pack scattered around, some studying, some watching something loud on the television. Rail was on the sofa reading. Down was at the table with his own work. They had achieved a new kind of silence between them, still quiet, but threaded now with small things. An eye contact, a passed cup of tea. The notebook, which had become its own ongoing conversation, passed back and forth with the casualness of something that had always existed. Seobin, who had no idea any of this was happening, dropped himself onto the sofa beside Rail, pointed at Dowan across the room, and said, at full volume, "Hey Dowan, what's the deal with you and Rail? Seriously. We've been a pack for 2 years. Do you actually like him, or what? Because honestly, the tension lately is making my eye twitch." The room went very still. Rail stopped breathing. Dowan's pen stopped moving. Seobin looked between them with the expression of a man who had just realized the pin was already out of the grenade and it was too late to do anything about it. Siobhan started. Go outside, Dowan said. Not to Siobhan, to Rail. Rail stood up. His book slid off his lap. He left it on the sofa cushion and walked out of the common room, down the hall, up the stairwell, and out through the rooftop access door that was technically supposed to be locked, but had had a broken latch for 7 months, and everyone knew it. The rooftop was cold and clear, a hard October night with stars and wind. Rail stood at the railing and gripped it with both hands and told himself to breathe. The door opened 30 seconds later. Dowan came and stood beside him. For a moment, they just stood there, the two of them, and the city lights and the wind. Then Dowan said, in a voice that was not steady, What will it take for you to love me? Rail turned to look at him. It was not a question. It had the shape of one, but it came out like something else, like something that had been building for a very long time and had finally broken through. Dowan was looking at the city, not at Rail, and his hands were on the railing, and his jaw was tight, and he looked terrified. Kim Dowan, who never looked afraid of anything, looked terrified. What? Rail said. I know I wasted it. Dowan's voice was quiet and rough. 2 years. I know what I did. I know what I didn't do. And I know I don't deserve. I'm not asking for that. I'm just. He stopped, pressed his lips together. I'm asking what it would take. If there's anything. If there's a version of this where you don't. Dowan. He stopped. Rail let go of the railing. He turned to face him fully. Dowan still was not looking at him, chin tilted slightly down, the posture of someone bracing for impact. Look at me, Rail said. Dowan looked at him. Rail studied his face in the cold light, the fear in it, the hope underneath the fear, small and careful like something that had almost given up on being real. You think I don't love you, Rail said. Dowan's breath caught. I have loved you, Rail said very slowly and clearly, since about month 3, when I found out you donate anonymously to the campus meal fund every semester, and you've never told anyone. He watched Dowan's face. I have been in love with you for almost 2 years, and I spent all of it learning not to need anything from you because you never gave me any reason to think you wanted me to. Silence. I didn't know how to, Dowan said, barely above a whisper. I know, Rail said. I was scared. I know that too. Rail, ask me again, Rail said. Dowan looked at him, confused. Ask me the question again, Rail said. The real one, not what it takes. The real question. Dowan was quiet for a long moment. The wind moved between them. The city hummed below. And then, in a voice that finally had no armor in it at all, Do you still love me? Rail reached out and took Dowan's hand off the railing. He held it in both of his own. He felt Dowan go very still, like an animal that has never been touched gently and does not know what to do with it. Yes, Rail said. Stupidly, inconveniently, yes. Dowan let out a breath. It shook. Okay, he said. Okay, Rail agreed. They stood on the rooftop for a long time after that, hands held, not saying much of anything. And for the first time, in 2 years, the silence between them was not empty. It was full. Being loved by Kim Dowan was, as it turned out, a very specific experience. It was not grand. It was not the sweeping, dramatic, hands-cupping face kind of love that happened in films. Dowan was not built for grand gestures. He had spent too many years keeping everything locked down to suddenly burst into effortless romance, and Rael, who knew him, who had read 12 pages of his honest, uncertain handwriting, did not expect him to. What Dowan gave instead was this presence. He started showing up. Actually, showing up, not in the dutiful, checklist way of before, but with intention. He would appear at Rael's bookshop during the last hour of Rael's shift on Thursdays and walk home with him. No announcement, no explanation, just, I'm here. He remembered things Rael mentioned once in passing, a book he wanted, a food he missed from home, a particular kind of tea he liked in the evening, and they would arrive quietly, without ceremony. He started sitting next to Rael at pack dinners instead of across the table. The pack noticed. Nobody said anything directly. Lee Siobhan had apparently been banned from commentary on this topic by a unanimous pack vote that Rael found out about secondhand and found profoundly touching, Junho said, when Rael told him everything. I knew it, at a volume that was inappropriate for the library. Then he hugged Rael so hard it hurt, and Rael let him, because some things deserve to be celebrated loudly. but it was not simple. Nothing real ever is. 3 weeks after the rooftop, they had their first fight. It was over something small, a pack decision Darwin had made without consulting Rael, the way he had always made decisions, alone and complete. Rael, who was no longer in the business of making himself small, said clearly, "That affects me. You should have asked me." Darwin had gone rigid and silent, the old armor slamming back into place so fast it was like watching a door shut. They did not speak for a day. Then Darwin appeared at Rael's door that evening and said, stiffly, formally, like a boy reading from a script he had written and revised many times, "I am not good at this. I will make mistakes, but I'm not going to disappear. I need you to know that I'm not going to disappear." Rael leaned against his doorframe and looked at him. "I know," he said. "I'm going to be bad at it sometimes. I know that, too." Darwin stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "I'm trying." "I can see that," Rael said. Gently. "I can see you trying, Dawan. That's not nothing." They had dinner together that night in Dowan's room. Takeout boxes spread on the floor. Some show Dowan had been watching on his laptop, propped against the wall. They sat close enough that their shoulders were touching, and Rael fell asleep halfway through the second episode. And when he woke up, he had been covered with a jacket that was not his, and Darwin was still awake beside him, reading, with the careful quietness of a person trying not to disturb something good. Rael looked at him in the half dark for a moment before closing his eyes again. "I am okay, T," he thought. The words were different now. Not a spell against longing, but a simple and genuine truth. "I am okay. I am more than okay." There was still the notebook. It never entirely stopped. Sometimes they were in the same room and a thought came, and it was easier to write it than say it out loud, especially for Darwin, who was still building the muscle of putting feelings into words. Rael kept every page. He would keep them all. One evening, a month after the rooftop, Darwin took the notebook and wrote something and slid it over without looking at Rael. Rael looked down. "I think I've been in love with you since the ceremony." When you gasped, everyone else would have been embarrassed. You just looked out at me like you were waiting to see what kind of person I was. I wanted to be a good one. I didn't know how Rael read it. He read it again. He wrote, "You're learning Darwin read it." His mouth curved. Just slightly. Just the beginning of something that was not quite a smile yet, but was very close. "I have a good teacher, T," he wrote. Rael rolled his eyes so hard it was almost audible. He took the notebook back and wrote, very firmly, "That's so cheesy, I can't believe you." The notebook came back. "You're keeping it." Rael looked at the page. He thought about pressing flowers in notebooks. He thought about warm things found in unexpected places. "Yes, T," he wrote. "Obviously, I'm keeping it." Spring came late that year. It arrived in fits and starts. A warm day, then cold again, then finally a week in April, when the campus courtyard trees all came out at once and everything was pale green and impossible and alive. Rael was sitting on the courtyard bench, his usual bench, the one he and Junho had shared that morning many months ago with their coffee cups. And he was reading. He had a tendency to forget where he was when he read, which meant he had also forgotten that he was supposed to be somewhere 10 minutes ago. A shadow fell across his page. "Pack meeting started," Darwin said. Rael looked up. Darwin was standing in front of him, with his bag on one shoulder and his jacket half zipped against the spring wind. And he was looking at Rael with an expression that by now Rael knew very well. Warm, careful, a little bit helpless in the way that only happened when Darwin thought no one was watching. Except Rael was always watching now, and Darwin was slowly learning to let him. "I lost track of time," Rael said. "I know. Junho messaged me." Darwin tilted his head. "Come on." Rael marked his page. He stood up. He was not thinking about anything in particular, just the light through the trees and the smell of spring and the ordinary miracle of a Tuesday afternoon. When Darwin reached out and took his hand, not under a table, not on a rooftop in the dark, here, in the middle of the courtyard, in broad daylight, with three other people within visible range. Rael looked down at their joined hands. He looked up at Darwin. Darwin was looking straight ahead, walking, jaw set in the particular way that meant he was doing something that scared him, and refusing to let the fear make the decision for him. Rael squeezed his hand. Darwin's grip tightened. They walked to the pack meeting like that. They were 12 minutes late, and Siobhan made a face that suggested he was physically restraining himself from commenting, and Junho, from his guest seat by the window, caught Rael's eye and gave him the most triumphant, silent expression in human history. Rael sat down. Dowan sat next to him, right next to him, shoulders touching, the way that was new and ordinary and extraordinary all at once. The meeting started. Later, much later, after dinner and after the pack had dispersed and after Junho had gripped Rael's arm in the hallway and said, "I am so proud of you," in a whisper that was more like a full shout. Rael and Dowan sat on the rooftop again. Same railing, same city lights below. Different sky now, spring pale, softer than October, stars less sharp. "Remember what you asked me," Rael said. "Up here the first time." Dowan was quiet. "What will it take for you to love me?" Rael said. Dawan turned to look at him. "The answer," Rael said, "was nothing. There was nothing it would take. I already did." He paused. But the question mattered, because it broke something open, and we needed something to break. Dawan looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached out and tucked a piece of Rael's hair back, very gently, and his hand stayed there, warm against Rael's cheek, careful, like something precious being held for the first time. "I spent 2 years," Dawan said quietly, "being the worst version of myself to the person I most wanted to be good for." "I know," Rael said. "That's not. You should probably be angrier at me." "I had 2 years to be angry," Rael said. "I'm tired of being angry. I'd rather have this." He leaned slightly into Dowan's palm. "I'd rather have you trying." Dowan let out a slow breath. He looked at the city below them, at the spring lights, the open windows, the world going on below. "I never knew how to be close to people," he said. "Growing up, it was safer not to need things. Needing things meant they could be taken away." He paused. "You needed things, quietly, all the time, and you never asked, and I saw it, and I thought, if I go toward that, if I let that matter." He stopped. "It could be taken away," Rael said softly. "Yes, Dowan." Rael turned to face him fully. "I know it doesn't fix 2 years, but I need you to understand something. You are not a thing I am going to walk away from because I'm scared. I am not built that way." He held Dowan's gaze. "The bond brought us together. You staying or going, that's not the bond. That's you. And I am choosing you. The actual you, the one who writes things in notebooks and donates anonymously and is terrible at feelings and trying anyway. I am choosing all of that." Dowan looked at him. His eyes were very steady and very bright. "I don't deserve," he started. "Nobody deserves anything," Rael said, which was something Junho had said to him once, that he had been saving for the right moment. "You just love people, and they love you back, and you build something together. That's all it is." Silence. The city hummed. The spring wind moved between them, warm for the first time, carrying the smell of the trees from the courtyard below. "Rael," Dowan said. "Yeah, I love you." 3 words, simple, unguarded, completely without armor. The realest thing Rael had ever heard come out of Kim Dowan's mouth. Rael felt his eyes sting. He blinked. He laughed a little, short and shaky. "Was that so hard?" he said. Dowan looked at him with an expression of profound suffering. "Yes, extremely. You'll get better at it. Will you be there while I do?" Rael looked at him. At the boy who had taken 2 years and a rooftop and 12 pages of handwriting to find his way here. At the boy who gripped railings when he was scared and watched Rael from across rooms and learned a person's laugh years late and still showed up. "Yes," Rael said. He reached out. He took Dowan's hand. "I'll be right here."